In this video, I want to talk about something called corporate governance. What are the rules of the game? That's really what corporate governance is all about. There are rules as to how the corporation is supposed to act. And of course, within those rules, there is information, there are rules for how the upper level management of the company is also supposed to act. So, how does this affect the company? Well, corporate governance has to do with operating decisions, and certainly that flows into the cash flow situations. Corporate governance gives us some guidelines on the financing decisions of the company. That, of course, affects the weighted average cost of capital and the riskiness of the firm. So, the value of the company is impacted by the corporate governance rules set up for the corporation. So the first thing we want to talk about is something called agency. The agency relationship comes about when one or more individuals, we'll call them principals, hire somebody else, an agent, to perform some service. They then delegate decision making to that agent. So if you kind of think about a lawyer is the principal, the lawyer is the agent, and the person that hires the lawyer is the principal. The principal hires the lawyer to provide a service, and they are supposed to act in that principal's best interest. So if you're a corporation, you're the only employee, right? You only have your money invested. Is there any challenge with you violating any rules with the owner since you are the owner? So in a sole proprietor, especially one with no employees, there's no agency problem. There's nothing that you would do that would take away from the value of the company because you are the company. So what are the benefits of being an owner slash manager then? Well, of course, you get to increase wealth because you own the company. You can also acquire different kinds of perks, right? Perquisites, assistance, expense accounts, right? Other types of benefits that accrue to you because of your position as the owner slash manager. The question we have with these benefits is who pays for them? Well, who bears the costs of these perks? If the owner manager owns all the stock, then it's the owner manager that bears the costs, right? But what if there are outside shareholders? What if the ownership is distributed amongst other people? Then they also then bear some of the costs of these perks. And of course, the more it's spread out, the smaller the cost per person, which means the people who are being impacted, because the impact is so small, in reality, it's a great number, but it's so small per person, nobody sees it. So minority shareholders are going to pay less for shares of stock because there is this implicit cost that goes to these other shareholders, right? They bear the cost, so the cost of the stock is going to be negatively impacted. So what's the difference between borrowers and lenders, right? After a loan is originated, what does the borrower do with the money? Well, they can invest in risky projects, maybe projects they didn't tell the lender about. Well, who benefits most? Well, is it a small payoff, a big payoff? Who's going to get the benefit? What if the benefit is large? Then the owners of the company get the benefit, and of course the lender is paid back with their own plus their return. But what if there's a loss? Who absorbs the losses? when a project that is riskier than we thought, riskier than was told, what happens if it goes bad? Who pays? Well, of course, it's the lender that is ultimately at risk when this happens. How does a lender adjust for this? Well, there's a cost, right? Creditors anticipate harmful actions by stockholders, right? So they can charge higher interest rates. Of course, when they do that, the cost of capital goes up. And we know that when the cost of capital goes up, the weighted average cost of capital goes up. And in our formula, that brings down the value of the company. This is what we refer to as an agency cost, right? It is a reduction in the value of the firm because of anticipated acts that the investors are not apprised of or not aware of. So how can we reduce these agency costs? Well, we can secure the loan with some company assets. We can collateralize the loans. We could also put some restrictive covenants in the debt agreements. Maybe we require them to maintain certain amounts of profitability and retained earnings at a certain level. Maybe keep our debt ratios at certain levels. Maybe not permit us to add additional debt. All of these things can cause us to think that maybe the cost of debt, the cost of agency, will be reduced. Now, in the modern corporation, right, shareholders, none of which have controlling interest, right? Many shareholders just don't have enough to control. So decision making is delegated by shareholders to the board of directors. This board delegates decision making to the hired executives. So where is this potential agency conflict between shareholders and managers? There is an economic theory called a rational decision maker. A rational decision maker is a person who places themselves before another person when they make a decision. So, for instance, when a building is on fire, the firemen exhibit irrational decision making. They run to the fire rather than away from the fire. So a rational decision maker would say, I'm going to look at myself, make sure I'm taken care of, and then make a decision towards a decision. And if that affects the company, it does. If it's positive or negative, then it does. So there are 6 potential problems with managerial behavior. 1, they could expend too little time and effort, right? They really just don't try. They can consume too many non-cash benefits, things that they get that have no impact on cash flow, but are definitely benefits. They can avoid difficult decisions because they have friends in the company, right? I'm not going to close that plant. I have too many friends there, even though it's a good decision for the company. We're going to reject risky, positive, net present value projects because I don't want to look bad if the project fails. So I'll take on risky, negative net present projects, and I'll try to hit a home run because they're very risky, but they have high potential payouts. I'm going to avoid returning capital to investor by making some additional investments. Maybe I'll put money in marketable securities, or I'll pay too much for acquisitions. So I'm not going to be able to return as much capital to my investors. Maybe we'll just massage some of the information. All right, so managers' earnings releases, right, to avoid revealing any kind of bad news. So again, let's kind of think back now. what is corporate governance all about? It's a set of laws and rules, right? Helps us with operations, help us understand decision making. The rules, some of them are going to be sticks and some of them are going to be carrots, right? So the sticks that we have talk about the threat of removal. The carrots that we can offer are compensation types of related benefits that we can provide. So what are the provisions that are under the firm's control? Well, of course, they control the board of directors, the charter provisions that affect takeovers. We can alter that to put some meat, if you will, into our rules. We can look at compensation plans. We can look at some of our capital structure choices. And in the end, we have some internal accounting standards and systems that can help bring to light, make more transparent some of these costs that ultimately reduce the value of the firm. So when we elect this board of directors, right, what's the mechanism that we use? This has actually come about since the days of Enron, right, where there was everybody was in cahoots. The board of directors was in cahoots with the accounting people, and the accounting people were in cahoots with the upper level management. So we need to have mechanisms to make it easier for us to have a more diversified type of board of directors, right? We need to have some minority interests on this board. They also select that typically the CEO should not be the chairman of the board and doesn't have any undue influence on the committees, right? So this has been a challenge where the CEO has also been the chair. Well, if the chair oversees the operations and the CEO is that thing that he's overseeing, it's kind of like the fox looking over the chicken coop, right? How do we control that? So we have to get the CEO out of that chair position so that we have, again, we're searching for transparency and information. We need to make sure that it's not an interlocking board. That is, the CEO of company A sits on the board of company B, and B sits on the board of company A. So really, we're just talking about people not being tangled in this web and not getting good decisions made for the company, right? What kind of compensation is appropriate, right? It needs not to be so high that it encourages cronyism, right? But we also have to think that, it just has to be a level that works fine. I have heard that if you're on the board of directors at Berkshire Hathaway, I heard Bill Gates say this once, that he was going to a shareholder meeting, and the amount that he got paid for being on the board of directors at Berkshire Hathaway wasn't enough to pay for the airfare to go to the shareholders meeting. Sometimes it's ridiculously low. We're not really interested in that, although it makes you wonder what kind of people you can get into your board if the compensation's too low. But on the other hand, if it's too high, you also get the same kinds of issues with people taking it serious. Maybe we need to add some anti-takeover provisions into the mix so that we can control and understand who could take over the company. So we have what's referred to as targeted share repurchases, where we can target certain kinds of shareholders to get them to sell back their stock. We can restrict some voting rights. There's lots of things we can do to help encourage management to do the right thing. Stock options are a very good way to get managers to think like owners. Give them stock so that when they increase the stock price, they're increasing their own wealth as well. So giving them the option to buy this stock is encouragement for them not to do things to take away the value, right? So usually you can't exercise these options right away, but essentially, if you do the right things, they will increase the wealth of the management. The challenges with these options is that if the manager underperforms the market, right, they can still get these rewards as long as they keep the stock price for a certain period of time. So there are issues with this, right? Stock ownership or block ownership. I mean, who owns big blocks of stock? It's mostly not individuals, right? These are institutions that own big blocks. The importance of this is because they are answering to others, right? Their shareholders, their owners, they will better monitor what managers are doing. So this block ownership puts another set of eyes on management to make sure that they act in a way that's going to be best for the shareholders of the company. And finally, there are some regulatory systems and laws. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act is probably the one that comes to mind most recently, right? But lots of companies have both regulatory and cultural kinds of rules and regulations that are going to help the company have better access to financial markets, be able to lower their costs of financing, increasing market liquidation, and maybe just putting less noise in stock prices, right? But all of these things are all geared at one thing. How can we get management to act in the best interest of shareholders? It's not the easiest thing to do, but we do know that it does happen, and we do have to have some insight into how to control it. Look forward to seeing you next time.